He was barely more than a shadow in the snow, curled beneath the base of an old pine. His tiny body shivered with each gust of wind ice, clung to the delicate tips of his ears. His chest rose, barely no sound came from him. No cry for help was slipping away silently like thickled itself, and then barking sharp urgent. Jasper, a golden retriever with anos, trained by love more than instinct, threw the snowbank his paws, dug madly into the drift hay, flinging up door and twigs until he wretched something. Warm something alive, Thefamly shouted after him. Stumbling out of the car, but Jasper didn't stop. He nudged the small body with his snout, licked the frozen face. That's when Thee saw him, a bobcat kitten, barely a month old, emaciated, frostbitten. Aisha, tight legs limp, not even an awe strength left to lift his head. Thefather wrapped him in his jacket. With thoughting, the mother held her breath. As he rushed back to the car, the children sat in silence, eyes wide. Jasper never took his eyes off the tiny bundle, nor resting on their mother's lap. They weren't prepared to find a wild animal fit. They definitely weren't prepared to fall in love with one. Neat happened on the edge of Glacier National Park in the dead of a Montana winter. Snow blanketed the trees' insolence. The wind howled over the hills like something alive. The Rivers family was driving home after the holiday, tired, quiet, their SUV carving a path through the icy road. The kids dozed in the back seat. World outside was frozen, and still then, Jasper stirred. The golden retriever lifted his head, ears pricking. A second later, he let out a sharp, broken bark, and before any uncle could react, he was pawing at the car door. They pulled over to calm him, thinking he had to relieve himself. But, moment the door opened, Jasper Boltita leaped into the deep snow, barking, digging, lunging toward the tree. Jasper. The father yelled, but the dog wouldn't stop. The family scrambled after him, slipping in the snow, following that trail of flung up powder, and then hestepped at the base of an old pina. Jasper was whining now, circling something barely visible under the low branches. They stepped closer. It was a kitten. No, not a kitten, wild, spotted, fermented, with ice tufts of pointed ears. A bobcat. Just a baby. He wasn't moving. Sawsmell. He barely dented the snow beneath him. His fur was clumped and wet, breathing, shallow eyelids frozen shut. Hadn't lifted his head. He didn't flinch. Jasper gently nudged his side. Hadn't reacted at all. The father knelt down, unzipped his jacket, and scooped Thecaton into his arms. He was weightless. Cold seeped through the man's gloves. For a moment, no one said anything. He's not going to make it, the mother whispered, but Jasper sat down beside them, his body pressed into the snow, watching, quiet, steady, and that was when they knew they had to try. They gave him a name. Finnegan's family rushed him to the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center, but Helpless was overwhelmed, full, and then something unexpected happened. The veterinarian, after examining the tiny bobcat, looked at them carefully and said, "He won't survive another night in Akajeg. If you're willing, you can take him home. Just for now, keep him warm, feed him slowly, watch for any sign of movement." And so Finnegan came home with Theriver's family. They made a space for Jimin, the quietest corner of the living room. His blankets, heating pads, a soft twirl beneath his tiny body. But he didn't move, didn't respond to voices. He didn't flinch at touch. He didn't eat that. Children took turns sitting beside him, whispering his name, the mother Tretney. Drops of formula with a syringe. Booth's mouth stayed closed, his breath washalow, his body limp until Asper laid down beside him. The golden retriever curled up close, his warm body precisely to the kitten's side. He didn't nudge. He didn't lick. He simply stayed there, still and calm as head. Resting beside the fragile creature, and Finnegan's breathing changed. Slight libet. It changed at night. No one in the house slept. They listened to the wind outside, the hum of the heater, the faintest sound off breath between dog and bobcat. And in the first light of morning, Finnegan opened Eddie's mouth just a little and took his first drop from the syringe. He began Tolov, because the dog never left his side of Jasper. Became his shadow. He lay beside Finnegan's blanket through every hour off a day, his head resting close, his tail twitching gently. Whenever the bobcat stirred, he wouldn't leave the room then for meals. If Finnegan moved, Jasper lifted his head. If Finnegan whimpered, Jasper responded with a low, reassuring brethren. that quiet presence that changed Waslow, but undeniable Effanin started. Eating more at first, just drops from a syringe, then a fuel lapse. From a shallow bowl, his muscles twitched again, his paws stretched and curled, and then one day he pushed himself up just for a moment. Before he lupsing back into the warmth of the blanket, but it was the beginning the next day, he stood shaky, clumsy, barely. Marathon a whisper of strength in his limbs, but he stood. Jasper watched from a few feet away, his tail thumping softly, and Finnegan, drawn by something he didn't understand, wobbled toward him at first. It was just coexistence, a fragile wild thing recovering. Under the quiet care, Oefe house pet, but then something changed. Finnegan started watching Jasper more closely, studying his movements, tracking geese. Habits. He dipped his nose into Jasper's water bowl, curiously lapping at it, even though his own was closer. Heatreat climbing into Jasper's dog bed, tumbling awkwardly over the soft edge, BFA curling up right in the middle one morning when Jasper chased a tennis ball across the kitchen floor. Finnegan froze ears, pricked. Then with a startled leap he bounded after it too. He didn't know why the ball mattered, but it made Jasper happy. And for Finnegan, that was reason enough. 3 weeks passed, and the fear in Finnegan's eyes slowly, quietly disappeared. He no longer flinched at footsteps, no longer froze at every unfamiliar sound. When Jasper approached, Finnegan didn't tense. He purred, a deep, vibrating sound that filled the quiet of the house like a heartbeat. Sometimes when Jasper came close, Finnegan would lift his head and press it gently against the dog's neck, and Jasper would respond with a soft nudge, careful, as if he understood just how small and fragile his friend still was. Finnegan began to wag his tail, not with the sharp, flicking irritation of Akka, but in slow, sweeping motions, mirroring Jasper when the dog barked. Otta squirrel through the window. Finnegan joined, not barking, but letting out a long, high-pitched yowl. It wasn't quite a wawl, but it wasn't far off. They ate together. Now side by side at their bowls, they slept together, curled into the same blanket. Their breathing synced, rising and falling in perfect time, and thephimally they watched it happen. Like people watching something they never knew was possible. A wild animal once half dead in the snow, now nestled into their home like he had always belonged. Followed the children from room to room, padding silently behind their footsteps. He let them stroke his backrest, their hands on his soft ears. Didn't mind the noise, the movement, the music, the laughter. He liked it. He had cozened them. This wasn't just rescue. It was something deeper, something no one had words for. It was friendship, it was trust, it was love. But even as Finnegan grew stronger, even as his bond with Jasper deepened, the Rivers family knew the truth. They didn't want to speak aloud. He was still a wild animal, no matter how gentle he seemed, no matter who heard when the children brushed at his fur, how he chased after Jasper with awkward joy of a puppy. He was a Bobcat, and someday instinct would awaken, nature would call him back, they told themselves. They were just a stop along his path that they had given him. What he needed to survive, that love, even if temporary, had been enough. And then tweements. Later the letter came, an official envelope, government seal, cold, precise language. The animal must be transferred, a registered wildlife rehabilitation, cert upon examination if deemed healthy. It is required by state law that the animal be released into its natural habitat. Room fell silent as the mother read the words aloud. No exceptions, no appeals. Finnegan, if strong enough, would be taken from them and returned to the wild. Thephimally sat quietly that night. Jasper lay at the foot of Finnegan's blanket, his shed resting near the Bobcat's paws. Finnegan blinked up at him, unknowing, trusting. He didn't understand the way that had settled on the house, but the Rivers family did, and for the first time since that snowy night in the forest, they felt helpless the day they took Finnegan back. No one spoke. The car ride was silent. The children pressed their faces to the windows. The mother kept one hand on Jasper's back, the other cradling small carrier where Finnegan lay curled, unaware of what was coming at Thrilled Life Center. The staff were kind but distant. Protocol paperwork. They opened carrier gently, ready to transfer him to quarantine. That's when Finnegan turned and looked back, not at the human sat. Jasper, his golden friend, stood frozen at the entrance, ears low, tail still ice-locked on the Bobcat who had shared his bed as food. His breath and Finnegan, hell up at him, was something that wasn't confusion or fear, it was knowing. Kind of knowing that leaves a marked moment past. Then they carried him away that night. Jasper didn't eat, hadn't moved from the window. He sat there until the sky turned black watching Theatrine. In the morning, the family found him standing in front of Finnegan's cemetery. Blanket in his mouth was the small soft toy Finnegan used to bat around with his paws. He laid it down gently then. Curled beside it, he didn't touch his food for 3 days. The children asked questions. No parent wanted to answer. Why did they take him? Why can't he stay here, Rafe? He's happy, but his hours there were no good answers. At the center, Finnegan was examined carefully. Blood work, vitals, strength tests, weight healthy, strong, ready for release, but no one asked about his behavior. No. One enticed that he didn't hiss or pace or climb, that he didn't respond to Thesmal of the trees outside, that hadn't looked toward the woods with hunger, a longing to them. He was just a Bobcat too, had recovered to the Rivers family, had become something else entirely. But the law didn't see that a week past the house was quieter now, to quiet every creak of the floorboard civery. Rustle of the wind outside, felt of ear, emptier. Jasper barely moved. From's front window morning to night. He sat in the same spot, ears forward, eyes wide watching. The trees waiting. He refused top lay. He ignored his food. He didn't respond to the children's voices calling his name sometimes late at night. Hewald let out a soft, aching whine. Not loud, not frantic, just low and broken, like a sound he didn't know how to stop making. He searched the rooms, sniffed. Every corner Finnegan had once explored nosed. The blanket they'd folded away rested his head on the empty dog bed they used to share. It was like a part of Feme had been removed and no one could give. Back finally, the mother picked up the phone and called the center. Her voice was quiet almost. Afraid of fiends we were wondering the Bobcat Finnegan. How is he? There was a pause on the other end. Then he was released. 3 days ago, near the edge of glacier not far from where you first found him, Wephallowed protocol, the words felt like ice released. Alone back to the cold world, he'd nearly died and the family hung up in silence. They understood it was his home, the wild, the mountains, the trees. It's where he was born, but Jasper didn't understand that all he knew was that his friend was gone and that no one had told him goodbye. More than a month had passed. Winter had loosened its grips. Snow melted into patches. The wind was softer now, but the silence in the house hadn't gone away. Then one afternoon, the family noticed something strange. Tracks small, round paw prints, too large for a house cat to light for. A coyote led from the edge of the wood stove. Their back door they checked. The motion camera by the porch, the footage jaws a grainy but unmistakably a shadow, low to the ground, muscular ear stell, and pointed a short tail curved in a slow arc behind it. A bobcat. The next morning, Jasper woke before anyone raised his nose to the window and let out a low-rising whine, louder this time urgent. His paws scratched at the glass. Family hurried over. Hearts Rishingot sighed near the edge of the yard. He wazed there Finnegan. He was taller now, his booty leaner, his muscles sharper, his cucumbered in the morning light thickler of autumn leaves and warm amber. He didn't move, he didn't run, he just looked right at them, and then slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to the ground and waited. They opened the door. Jasper ran straight through the yard, paws pounding, ears back. He crossed the field without hesitation. Finnegan stood and walked to meet him. There was no sound, no noise, but the wind and the trees met in the open space between forest and home, to creatures from different worlds. Reunited without a word, Bobcat hadn't forgotten. He came back to the family who had saved him, to Thedeg, who had never left his side. Now Finnegan roams the forest free, as he wasn't to be, but every evening as the sun sinks behind the trees, he returns to Jasper. They meet in the clearing behind the house, like old brothers, no leash, no offense, just understanding. They chase each other through the tall grass, circle in wide loops, tumble together in the golden dust. When they're tired, they lie side by side beneath the pines, breathing slowies, half closed, and somehow they understand each other. No words, no auspices. Just a bond that doesn't ask questions, because family isn't always. You're born to sometimes family is stays beside you when the world feels cold. If this story moved, you should read, subscribe to Hope and Fur for more real stories of love, rescue, and the animals who change our lives forever.